Thanks, Andrew. So over the last decade, the Federal Department of Environment has funded 3 major environmental research initiatives. And each of those initiatives has resulted in the funding of a hub in Northern Australia. And each of those hubs has been led and based at Charles Darwin University, which is a pretty remarkable achievement. So the first of those was the Commonwealth Environmental Research Facilities Program, which led to the funding of TRACK, the Tropical Rivers and Coastal Knowledge Hub. The next one was the National Environmental Research Program, which is just currently finishing up, and that led to the formation of the Northern Australian Hub. And the current program, which is only just starting, is the National Environmental Science Program, and that's leading to the funding of the North Australian Environmental Resources Hub. So I was just going to talk a little bit about each of those initiatives and what RIEL's role has been in each of those. So the first one was TRACK, and TRACK was a consortium of researchers that came together to provide research that would support sustainable management of Northern Australia's tropical rivers and estuaries. And there was about 100 researchers at any one time working as part of the consortium from 18 different organisations around Australia. And over the 6-year period that it was running, we ran about 27 different projects, and we attracted about $20 million of cash from a range of external sources. Now RIEL, or at the time it was the School for Environmental Research, was the host of that hub and provided leadership of projects looking at social and economic research, but also it had a real focus on food webs, biodiversity and understanding aquatic resources. And most of the research, the social, economic and environmental research, was focused around providing information to support water planning in Northern Australia. And it led to the formation of one project, the Daly River Fish and Flows project, which Dave Crook will talk a little bit about later on. As that finished, we started off with another program which was focused slightly differently. This was on research to improve biodiversity conservation in Northern Australia. So not so much about development, but about conservation. But again, another large consortium led from Charles Darwin University, 80 researchers from nearly 19 organisations across Australia, 17 projects and about $15 million over the 4-year lifespan of the program. And again, RIEL was very important in leading projects around social and economic research, and also looking at terrestrial biodiversity, the impacts of weeds and how that affects fire regimes and carbon management across the north, and Natalie Rossiter will talk more about that later. But there was also a major focus of the program at looking at biodiversity in freshwater systems and using Kakadoo's floodplains as a model example of that. And so that allowed us to do a range of research looking at things such as ecogenomic indicators of salinity on floodplain systems, and then looking at the movement of organisms between freshwater and marine systems. And it also allowed us to continue working in the daily on environmental flows through the Fish and Flows project. There was also a project that was looking at managing the threats of weeds, not in terrestrial systems, but on floodplain systems, and the implications of that for biodiversity and also Indigenous cultural values. So Dave will talk about some of the work that's been happening in terms of the movement of fish and elasmobranchs. And Natalie will talk about some of the weeds work, but there was work happening in the floodplains which was looking at changes as a result of grassy weeds to freshwater biodiversity, but also what that meant for the management of cultural values in the park. And that work has now resulted in Kakadoo rewriting its weeds management strategy to be informed by the outcomes of that research. And the outcomes of that research and across the hub informing management is facilitated greatly by the fact that we've invested a lot of money and effort and thought into knowledge brokering and communication. So we've got a really dedicated and talented team of knowledge brokering and communication staff who are part of the NERP Hub, and they've been producing all sorts of products in terms of seasonal calendars, Indigenous calendars based on, in this case, fish from using local languages in the Kimberley, and fact sheets and highly targeted information products for a range of different audiences. One of the things that we started under the TRACK program was looking at the use of videos, and that's really taken off under NERP. We've now produced more than 20 videos across our research program. These are available on websites like Vimeo and YouTube. We've had more than 45,000 hits on those that have been downloaded and watched. In fact, it's the second most visited part of the website, apart from the homepage. These links get picked up by other social media outlets, and more recently we had 4 videos screened on Indigenous Community TV, and that means that that's reaching an audience of about 40,000 people per day. We've also screened those videos at other events like before deck chair cinema screenings of major feature films, And the footage that's been collected as part of that has been really helpful in getting us national media coverage. So it's been a really important part of the program. That program finishes up, the activity period finishes in a month's time, and at the moment we're just planning the next phase of research in Northern Australia around the North Australian Environmental Resources Hub. And the byline for this is to look at research to support sustainable development in Northern Australia and to tackle some of the big challenges to try and create solutions to some of those big environmental challenges. At the moment, it's just the 14 people who were named as lead researchers on that program, but that consortium will grow once we have a better idea of what the research priorities are and what the likely projects are going to be, and we're just scoping those up at the moment. It's nearly $24 million over 6 years, and we've been given 16 priorities by the Australian government that we have to address during that period, and we've organised those around half a dozen big themes. One is focused on how do we minimise the risk to environment as a result of more intensive development across the north. How do we better manage the pervasive and more widespread threats to Northern Australia, weeds, fire, ferals, for example, and the implications of that for threatened species in particular? How do we monitor changes in trend and condition in natural resources and across the north? And then 2 cross-cutting themes around Indigenous natural resource management and valuing the economic contribution of environmental resources. So RIEL researchers have played leading roles in each of those hubs and in leading projects in each of those initiatives. But throughout all of them, the aquatic ecology and management activity has been a central part of those hubs, and so I'll just talk a little bit about the group within RIEL that does that work. So there's 9 researchers currently in that theme, and I must say the number of people employed in this ebbs and flows with the start and finish of those different programs. And so at the moment, we're probably in a transition between those 2 programs. So a year ago, we would have had nearly twice as many people working on this. So it's a mixture of senior staff and early career researchers, and 2 of those researchers, Pierre and Laura, are NAMRA postdocs. So that's a very important partnership in terms of building capacity and expanding that understanding between freshwater and marine systems. We also have 3 PhD students who are working on that same issue. So 3 PhD students, Pete Novak, Sharon Every and Kate Buckley, who are all looking at understanding the ecology of organisms that move between freshwater and marine environments. So that's an important part of the work on connectivity. So as well as the researcher, central to that, as Andrew mentioned, is these collaborations and partnerships. And so it's been really important for our group to be part of the NERP and the Northern Hub and also the Marine Hub. But also we've forged an initiative between CDU and NT Fisheries, and that's been a really productive partnership. That's led to funding coming from Fisheries and matching funding from CDU, which has led to the joint appointments of Dave Crook and Alison King, which has really increased capacity in this area. It's led to more collaborative projects directly with Fisheries and scoping up research projects which have been successful. So there's some new projects, nearly $1 million worth of new research that's been funded as a result of that partnership. And it's led to co-supervision of projects, and it allows us to provide timely advice to Fisheries in terms of policy and management. So the major projects that we have on the go at the moment is really completing the NERP Northern and NERP Marine Hub projects that Dave will talk about in a minute, but also starting up some of these new projects that are funded by Fisheries Research and Development Corporation, looking at stock structure of coastal reef fish and also looking at the influence of changes on freshwater flows on coastal fisheries. And there's a range of other projects, both in Northern Australia but also in the Murray-Darling Basin, which are involving our researchers. So the future for our group within the RIEL is really focused around NESP at the moment, in particular the Northern Hub, which will have, again, going back to a bit like TRACK, a focus on development and understanding the implications for water resources, which are very central to development in most of Northern Australia, but then also links with the Marine Hub as well. And there are other hubs, such as the Threatened Species Recovery Hub, which also has a presence in Charles Darwin University, and so we'll be working closely with that hub as well. The other thing that we're coming to an end at the moment is the CDU and NT government the Fisheries partnership, and at the moment we're looking at expanding that partnership to DLRM as well as Fisheries, and looking at the opportunities that might come from that, as well as I said, bringing on board these new FRDC projects and continuing to apply for ARC linkage and discovery grants to really build our capacity in those areas as well. So I'll leave it there and pass on to Dave.